this idea of the lawfare strategy. Much has been made in the wake of 2020. Are we going to have our lawyers out? Are they going to have their lawyers out? What kind of shenanigans are they going to try and pull? We have now seen that Mark Elias is, been hired by the Harris Waltz campaign for the recount effort, quote unquote. What can you tell us about that, Mike? And, what is the cause for concern if there is any?
I think President Trump learned his lesson from 2020, Andrew, and he's actually spending the money and hiring good attorneys to file the lawsuits and get the injunctions before the election, because if you try to file lawsuits after the election, after the Democrats rig and steal the election, it's very hard to get judges to find the backbone to actually do something about it. That means they would have to overturn the entire state's election, and a lot of these judges just don't have the fortitude to do that. And so Trump's hiring good lawyers at both on the campaign with Harmeet Dillon and Dave Warrenton leading the effort there. And then at the RNC Chairman Michael Whatley is doing a really good job this time on the legal effort. And, we're never going to be as good as Mark Elias on the Republican side, but we are in a place now where it's not going to get rigged and stolen again in 2024. We just saw this, Andrew, at the Supreme Court today. Mark Elias just got his ass kicked at the Supreme Court on non-citizen voting, where you had the 6 Republican-appointed constitutional justices say that this Virginia Biden federal judge is not going to put 1,600 self-identified non-citizens back onto the Virginia rolls. The Biden and Harris know that Trump is actually going to be very competitive in Virginia, so they're trying to rig and steal it in Virginia by putting non-citizens on the rolls, and the Supreme Court just stopped them. So it's a very good sign, and we're going to win this thing. I would say this to your listeners: as long as we continue to show up, Trump supporters continue to show up and vote as early as possible, bank your vote and vote in massive numbers, we're going to win this thing, and the lawyers are not going to matter.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the hope, right? Isn't it, Mike, that we too big to rig? You hear this, the Trump campaign says it, we say it. I think that's really right. And by the way, a lot of the Democrat firewalls that we've seen in the past with early voting are not there in the numbers that they need them to be, which means it's a modeling and a turnout issue at this point, right? So those firewalls, so Dems have a 380,000 vote firewall in Pennsylvania. They had a 1.1 million. They can still win this if we don't show up. Right. So that's the key. It's like, don't take any of this predictions to the bank. We got to do the work. We got to show up. We got to turn out. Now, I want to turn our attention to this video. This is cut 64. This was in Doylestown, Pennsylvania yesterday. You have Josh Shapiro tweeting out saying, hey, if you're in line by 5 o'clock, they can't turn you away. You get in line by 5, you can get to the early vote. Meanwhile, we have security services putting out end of line and blocking people from the vote. I saw this because Michael Whatley tweeted out, so you already brought him up. So I think he's doing a great job in here. Let's go ahead and play cut 64.
It's 2:41, and they are ending the line.
So for our radio audience, that was a security personnel, might have been a police officer, I'm not sure, putting a sign at the end of the line saying end of line. And it was at 2:41 in the afternoon. They're supposed to be able to vote by until 5 or get in line. There's the RNC's filing suit there, are they not, Mike? That's what I've heard.
They are, and they should, because I'll tell you what, if those are actually police officers suppressing the vote, they're going to have some very serious problems with the Trump 47 Justice Department, particularly the Civil Rights Division, because if you're using your authority as a police officer, the color of law, to suppress votes, that is a very serious federal civil rights crime. So I hope that these police officers and other security officials get very clear legal direction so they're not violating the law.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And then there was another instance, 45, also highlighted by Michael Whatley. A woman was telling people to stay in line in Pennsylvania, and they arrested her for it. Play cut 65.
Wow. That's crazy. You locked her up? That is insane, man. She is not influencing people. She is not at all.
All right, so this woman was basically saying you can stay in line until 5 o'clock. Don't let them turn you away. And I guess she gets arrested for what? Incitement or trying to influence voters? Mike, break it down for us.
That's a very good question, and they better point to a very clear viewpoint and content neutral law that says that they can arrest someone for doing that. I'd be surprised if there is one. And that be separate from state laws, there's also the First Amendment. So that one's a head scratcher to me. They better have a very good explanation for arresting someone like that, because you're violating someone's civil rights if you don't.
Maureen, I want to take it to you. Take me into the heartbeat of the war room posse right now. What are you guys seeing? What are you hearing? What is the drumbeat coming from Steve and the war room posse, such as yourself?
Well, the whole message that he had while he was in Danbury and now is get out the vote. Everyone must get out the vote. And like we've seen in these clips, you need to stay in line. Don't let someone try and tell you that you can't vote. Your vote matters. You whatever you can to get out and vote. And not only you, but your friends, family, anyone that you know. And don't let someone try and deter you from doing that. And I think that that's the message that we've been reiterating on the show, while my dad was away, now, and just that the left is going to try and push people from not casting their vote, and that's exactly what we don't need. And I think that, as my dad would say, action, action, action. Everyone needs to get involved in making sure that we all get out to vote to help secure a victory for Donald J. Trump on November 5th.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what you're saying here. All of this conversation, especially in the last cycle, about do we trust our voting system, the integrity of the election? It's like, well, of course we have issues with a lot of things, but what you're hearing from this show, what you're hearing from Charlie, what you're hearing from Steve, what you're hearing from the president, Mike Davis, we have to do our part. We have to get out and vote. We're not using that as an excuse, any issues or concerns. We're saying all of that is motivation to fight harder, to lawyer up earlier, to attack these issues sooner. And so I hope everybody in the audience gets the memo. Like, this is not an excuse. None of these issues that we are highlighting is an excuse not to activate and get out and go vote. As a matter of fact, it's more motivation. We're trying to stay vigilant. We're trying to raise the alarm with issues as we see them, so we can put the fires out earlier and we can actually take action where we need to. Now, Mike, I want to pivot to this idea of what happens after the election. So Mark Elias is apparently hired for the recount, was some of the reporting I was seeing. Do you think there's a plausible situation here? If we swarm the polls, are they going to try? I mean, many of these states are going to keep counting for multiple days. There was a ruling in Nevada where they're going to be able to keep counting votes for like 3 days or 4 days afterwards. Are we going to have a battle on our hands to get this election certified?
Well, there is an important Fifth Circuit case that just came out, written by Andrew Oldham, a fantastic Trump-appointed judge down there, a federal appellate judge, and joined by 2 other appellate judges, that says that under our federal statutes, you have to have ballots cast and received by election day. You can't keep dragging this on for days after the election. That's not what the statute calls for, as it deals with the federal races, as like for president, for U.S. Senate, U.S. House. I think the Supreme Court is going to be very receptive to that argument, because think about what's happening here, Andrew. They're going to say that we're going to let ballots come in after the election, 3, 4, 5 days after the election, that aren't even postmarked. That is just ripe for fraud, and that's just not going to happen. At a minimum, those ballots need to be segregated from the other ballots.